we got to start with the game last night, which, listen, on paper was a completely marquee matchup. We gave all the implications here on the show about what it meant to your division bets in the AFC North and how the Ravens could have put a stranglehold on the division if you believe that the either DTR or PJ Walker-led Browns and Mirage Steelers are in fact those things and not as good as the Bengals are as the Ravens competition. And the Ravens did just that in terms of the final score. In terms of the final score, they win it 34-20, and they do have the tiebreaker now with the Bengals, who fall to 0-3, by the way. The Bengals do in the division. But this was a Pyrrhic victory for the Ravens, a very costly one, and perhaps a season ender in terms of all playoff hopes for the Bengals. That is yet to be determined with the fate of Joe Burrow. In case you missed this last night, this was just a roller coaster, Kelly, of sort of team fates, for 2023. A roller coaster of emotions when it came to those things. Baltimore, as they do, they start that game with a 9-play, 75-yard drive. Lamar was responsible for 71 of them. Gus in from 3 for a 7-0 lead. But 2 plays prior to that, Mark Andrews rolled over by linebacker Logan Wilson. Mark Andrews would not return, and as we learned after the game, Coach John Harbaugh said that looks like it's season-ending for Mark Andrews with an ankle injury. Now, the tackle employed by Logan Wilson, which will come up again, by the way, shortly as we go through this game, is called a hip drop tackle, which I really hadn't heard that term thrown around myself very often. I'm not sure about you. But at league meetings in October, Rich McKay, the chairman of the NFL's competition committee, described the move as a tackle on which a defender encircles his opponent. Wow, sounds like a shark or something. Mm-hmm. And then drops his weight down to bring him to the ground. This often causes the defender's legs to swing around the offensive player's body, taking them out behind the knees. Well, that's what happened to Mark Andrews. And as this game progressed a couple drives later, McPherson, by the way, got a 50-yard field goal to make it 7-3, cut the lead to 7-3 Baltimore. A couple 3-and-outs. Traded, and then Baltimore had a 3-and-out, but in the third down play of that 3-and-out, Lamar Jackson had to go to the tent. Logan Wilson, same linebacker for the Bengals, with the old hip drop tackle there too, and Lamar was slow to get up. Now, I'm not sure how many bettors right at that moment, because Lamar took a little while to get up, but he got up eventually. He did go to the tent after that and never missed a play in this. But we did see Tyler Huntley throwing on the sideline at one point as well. I wonder how many bettors went to try to bet a Bengals money line at that point. McPherson did get a 53-yard field goal try that was no good. First play of the second quarter, it's still 7-3 after the Ravens punted. Then the Ravens did go 12 plays, 82 yards in 7 minutes and 22 seconds. This put our first half Ravens bets that I recommended yesterday on the show in jeopardy. Burrow to Mixon from 4 out to make it 10-7 Cincinnati with 5:49 left in the second quarter. But yet another big but here. Burrow in severe pain after throwing the football on the touchdown. Right wrist injury. The Prime Video broadcast showed video of Burrow getting off the team bus with a brace or some kind of contraption around his right wrist and thumb. Burrow was not at all on the injury list all week. And the NFL now, Kelly, is investigating why that was the case.
Good.
Yeah, it is good, especially for those of us who bet on things, it's good. But if you're wondering, like, beyond the betting implications of this sort of thing, Zach Taylor, first of all, the coach of the Bengals, and this is a quote, he said he was not aware of Burrow dealing with any wrist issue prior to the game. There's other Bengals teammates that said the same thing. I thought it was good to go. The NFL, for just sort of thoroughness' sake, routinely looks into matters of compliance with its injury report policy. The league takes injury report violations seriously, with punishments including team fines or potentially a lost draft pick. The NFL warned teams at the spring owners' meetings that they are required to list all injuries.
Yeah, that's garbage. There is the picture that's been circulating. I saw it earlier in the week. I think it was from a local news camera out there that could see them getting off a bus with that rap too. And it was, when he's not on the injury report all week, you just don't really think of anything of it. And
he tried throwing on the sideline. He dropped into a catcher's crouch in pain immediately.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if I believe that all week he was absolutely fine.
I also don't believe that it's just a sprain. Like, I don't know. We'll find out. MRI scheduled for Joe Burrow. So Obviously, he did not return to the game. It was Jake Browning thereafter in what was just what's the opposite of riveting second half? Just absolutely.
What a dud, man.
Yeah, the second half just became this sort of joke of punts traded and field goals traded. But late Baltimore, by the way, late just to conclude, Baltimore did break it open finally with their last touchdown to make it 34-13. On a drive where Lamar went to OBJ, who looked great last night, and Odell Beckham Jr., by the way, 51-yard play, but he got up holding his shoulder. Who was on the tackle this time? Not a hip drop, but Logan Wilson was on it. Logan Wilson was responsible for 3 Ravens injuries last night, if you consider Lamar one of the injuries as well. Gus went in for 4, 34-13, and then the Bengals did get a garbage touchdown. The betting thing last night. No, well, you finish your thought before I get to that.
I was just going to say, like, JVT and I were talking about this a bit like last week when it came to the NBA, and it's, we all said and thought as bettors, a couple years ago that when these leagues were getting more involved with the sports gambling companies, that there was a chance that a good chance that we were going to see more transparent injury reports, and it's just not been the case. No. It's just not at all been the case.
And for a league that screams integrity, right, and for those of us in this corner of the universe, right, who got, from the betting standpoint, who got screamed the word integrity down our throats, right, that gambling was the real threat to the NFL. All of this stuff is, you throw it in the mix. It's all such hypocrisy on this. But Baltimore now has led. We said this yesterday that it was 28 minutes that they have had the lead in all but 28 minutes all season. Well, now they've had the lead in all but 32 minutes and 15 seconds this season. That's the second fewest through 11 games since 1970, as they up their record now to 8-3. They could very well be 11-0, perhaps not should. I agree with the person who tweeted yesterday that said it becomes a pattern after 3. But 8-3, and now they get a bye week. And by the way, Odell Beckham Jr. said, and I'll get the exact quote on this, but he did say, quote, happy we got a little weekend to recover. Not a bye week, but they have the extra time. Beckham said on Prime after the game, I'm going to need it. So Odell Beckham Jr. hoping for the best. He already put a harness on the shoulder. He was not happy about the injury yesterday. The Bengals, if you're wondering, what are they like with Burrow? What are they like without? And that was the interesting thing also. We were talking about all the check marks in the Ravens column yesterday, but then I noted that Burrow mattered, that since the beginning of 2020, I believe it was, that the Bengals were 12-0-1 against the spread when they were dogs of 3 or more with him as quarterback. Last night, throw it out, obviously, because he didn't make it to the second half. But with Burrow as a starter since 2020 when he entered the league, Burrow and the Bengals are 29-21-1. They average 24.7 points per game and 256 passing yards per game without Burrow. 7 games in which he has not started since 2020, because obviously he's had multiple injuries now, blowing out his knee being the biggest one. The Bengals are 2-5. So from 29-21-1, they dropped to 2-5. Instead of 24.7 points per game, they only average 16.3 points per game. And instead of 256 passing yards per game, they only average 154 passing yards per game. That courtesy of ESPN Stats and Information. So obviously that quantifies what you would already know instinctively. So there it is. And the Steelers not only now face they will get Dorian Thompson-Robinson this week, but then it looks like they're going to get Jake Browning right after that. So incredible. The Steelers' Jedi mind trick on the NFL continues. I will just say this about, that game last night. The betting moments in that game. This is why if you're not watching, because we have a lot of handicappers who like to wear it. Dr. Bob was coming up on the show later. I always had this talk with Bob. He used to wear it as sort of like this badge of honor that he didn't watch games, right? And I used to say to him, Bob, there's no way you can possibly grasp the essence of all these games without doing so. I also thought he was sort of just trumping it up for legend's sake, that he watched more than he let on. So I don't know if he was even being completely honest about that stuff. But last night, when Burrow went down, the rush, and because it was streaming, you couldn't get in there in time to really bet the Bengals successfully. Most people didn't. But at halftime, when they threw up the line where the Ravens were only 2.5-point favorites, and you didn't know with 100% certainty that Burrow wasn't playing, but you kind of did.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, and by the way, it ended up being a 3-point line, so it ended up being a push for those who didn't get there in time. But if you were fast enough, that was the moment where it was clearly streaming, whatever it was. At halftime, you have the time to do it. They threw up a 2.5 on the Ravens. I couldn't believe that it was only 2.5.
Three's a pretty bad beat.
Three is a bad beat because they converted a 4th down on that last drive too. Yeah,
and Baltimore was in complete prevent. Do whatever you want, Browning. Like it was.
Here's the thing, though. I mean, as much as we talk about, maybe the Bengals season is over if it's, if there's no Burrow in a completely congested AFC playoff picture. You got to figure teams like the Bills and the Texans are the biggest beneficiaries. What about the Ravens without Mark Andrews? Lamar Jackson, he said after the game, that's my number one most of the time. I mean, what's the bigger impact on yesterday's games? Teams like the Bills that now have a better chance at a wild card, or the Chiefs who look at that injury and are like, we rule the roost now again?
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.